Mm. Hi, I'm Wojciech Drąg. I'm a professor of English at the Institute of English Studies, and I have a distinguished guest here visiting us from KU Leuven in Belgium, Professor Pieter Vermeulen. He is the author of three books. His most recent one came out from Routledge, Literature in the Anthropocene. He has now finished his new book project, and I would like to ask him about that project. Yesterday, he ran a little literary workshop on literary value, and this is the subject that I know this project is concerned with.
Okay, Wojciech. Glad to be here, and thanks for inviting me. So, as you said, my new project is basically focusing on this notion of literary value, which, as I was doing my research, turns out to be quite a complicated, paradoxical notion, having to do with uncertain and shifting place of literature in contemporary life. And that's also how I got interested in that topic. We are living in a world where literature and literary studies, which is also important for academics, are becoming less and less self evident. That's one side of the story. But the other side of the story is, of course, I think that we can still say that in some half magical way, people are still attracted to literature. People somehow still tend to take it more seriously than other commodities. And the book I've been writing has been trying to capture that paradox. What explains the way literature, on the one hand, has become totally banal, but on the other, seems to also resist that banalization. And I look at that from a theoretical perspective, engaging with perspectives from cultural sociology, literary criticism, aesthetic theory, but also in the interdisciplinary field of valuation studies. But apart from the theoretical angle, I also wanted to ask the question that, as a literary scholar, I was trained to ask the question: what does that mean for literature itself? What does it mean for literature to have to affirm its own value in the world, to affirm its own place in a world that has less and less place for it? And the conclusion that I've more or less landed on is that what literature and literary stakeholders like critics and publishers and academics have come to do is really begin to link the value of literature to non-literary values like ethics, empathy, cosmopolitanism. Memory is a very important one in the 21st century. So what you see in the way people talk about literature and in what novels themselves are doing is that they really very carefully make a claim for literature by saying that, for instance, it is just very good at, in a uniquely ethical way, remembering the horrors of the past, which kind of explains, I think, why the Holocaust is so ubiquitous in celebrated contemporary literature. What I would add to that, and what I see as a consequence of that need to link literary to non-literary values, is that in that articulation, in that connection, literature needs to insist that it's a necessary partner in that discussion, that you cannot just have empathy and cosmopolitanism and memory without literature. And this to me explains why a lot of literature in the last 20, 25 years will really use a lot of formal devices, often quite gimmicky devices, through which they signal, I am literature. Don't forget. Don't equate me with our format section. So that's more or less what I've been working on. It's still a work in progress, but I think I'm getting to the end of it now.
During the workshop you gave yesterday, you showed some examples of how this link is made between, for instance, the Nobel Prize. The novel, the authors that are being awarded the prize receive this one person, one sentence, sort of commendation for authors, and in shop away from which this sort of emphasizes the external interaction.
Yeah.
So the Nobel Prize for Literature was awarded a couple of weeks ago. I wanted to ask about that, and you follow the Nobel Prize quite closely. Which which authors do you expect to win the Nobel Prize in the next couple of years, and which authors do you think should win the prize? Okay, what do you think? You check that as someone might be
Yeah. So I've been long interested in the Nobel Prize as one of the weirdest things in the literary world. I worked in Sweden for a couple of years. I there noticed that the people who decide on the Nobel Prize are just regular middle-aged white guys walking around Stockholm, and they still have this power to elect the best writer in the world, and they have the power to just motivate that choice by giving you one oracular, strange sentence which the rest of us, common readers, are supposed to make sense of, but which often are almost as poetic as the works that are celebrated. So I think when I'm interested in literary value, I also got very interested in the way that something as banal as a group of middle-aged Swedish guys have such an outsized influence on what counts as literature, what counts as good literature. Now, when you look at the recent history of the Nobel Prize, especially since the crisis in 2016, 2017, after which they came out with the combined Nobel Prizes for Peter Handke and Olga Tokarczuk, what you can say, what I think most people would say, is that they have shown excellent taste since then. So the writers they have selected since then, Hankan, Jo Vosse, Louise Gluck, and the other recent winners are, I would say, objectively, but of course there's no objectively there, but are likely considered to be interesting, exciting authors. So it's very clear to me that in the last 7, 8 years, their focus has really been on the quality of writing, some kind of purely literary criteria. At the same time, and that's the point I also want to make in my book, at the same time, they do motivate that literary excellence by linking it to things like an inquiring spirit, a kind of memorial capacity, a kind of intercultural curiousness, as in the case of Tokarczuk. So you still see the Nobel Prize jury carefully linking literature to the rest of the world. Yeah, and then to get to your question, yeah, again, I think that when you look what they've done in the last couple of years, geography is important, gender is important, genre is important. I think in the next couple of years, we will see at least one winner from the Hispanic world and at least one winner from the German world. And it's there that I think that one of the big names, and this is a bit awkward to have this on record, but I think Hilly Evenbeck, the German writer, is going to be a big candidate, especially because what you see in the last couple of years is that the people who win the Nobel Prize are often the people who, a few years before winning the Nobel Prize, have really been celebrated in what is very much the center of literary value in the world, in New York, right? And this is something that has happened with Jelly Erdogan the last couple of years. He's really become, and this is quite typical of recent Nobel Prize winners, more popular abroad than in their own country. Another name that I'd like to put out there that I think might profit from the situation is another German-speaking writer, Esther Kinsky, who's not super famous, but who writes in a style that corresponds a lot to recent winners. Serious, meditative, very purified, clean style. And also, and that's the last thing I want to say in response to that, she's a very celebrated translator. And I think when you look at what the Nobel Prize jury has rewarded in the past couple of years, and what it has not yet rewarded, then translation is for me a big omission. They have not yet showcased the importance of translation as vitally important for the literary field. And I would be disappointed if they did not do that in sometime in the next couple of years.
My very last question. You mentioned Olga Tokarczuk a moment ago, and I heard that you've read her work, and just because obviously we're in Poland, I'm curious to know which.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I must say that in response to that question, I'm like just a walking cliche that I must admit I haven't read that much Polish literature. I've been very impressed with Tokarczuk, especially the books of Jacob, which to me opened up the whole new cultural and geographic panorama that where I'm living in Belgium, people are rarely aware of this Central European to Turkish connections that this book focuses on are things that I was super excited to learn about. I think honestly the only Polish author that I read when I was still young and excited about Greek literature was Gombrowicz. I remember that when in the town where I lived, the library had like a very old edition of the journals, which smelled weirdly and had clearly been read by many people. I remember reading that when I was 15 or 16. I remember reading pornography and fairly to if that's something. And so after that, so I remember that when I was a young student, he really spoke to me. The kind of I should again say the strangeness of the way he imagines and arrives the world really spoke to me when I was young. So I'm very open to suggestions of names of Polish authors. I'll be more than willing to have to that naturally. That's great.
Well, thank you so much. You seem to have, thank you. You got the end of our first encounter. I hope you have a wonderful stay.
I definitely am saying that. Thanks so much. So, thank you. Thank you.